Shepherd.
Shepherd. Shepherd.
Shepherd.
Shepherd.
Shepherd.
Shepherd. Shepherd. Shepherd. Shepherd.
Shepherd. Shepherd.
I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite
Tier list.
on the Citadel.
What is the best part of the Mass Effect series?
The story. It's one of the few stories that I've ever played a game through, especially all the way through from start to end, from the first game through to the third game. Not only does it build and grow over time, but it really, really brings you in to the story and connects you to the characters in an incredible way.
So the Squadmates are a critical and pivotal part of the stories, and that's what we're going to be doing today, is a tier list of all of the Squadmates that you can take with you throughout the Mass Effect series, including those that come just with either the Legendary Edition, which is what this is based on, or I guess the DLC, because when Mass Effect originally came out, there were a couple characters that I think you could only access with the DLC. From best to worst, we've got N7, On My Suicide Mission, Purgatory, Shift Specialist, and Leave Them on Eden Prime. And first up is a character you know and love, Ashley Williams.
Oh my god. Leave her on Eden Prime.
I knew you were going to say that. Now, hold on. Because I actually, when I had that mission in Mass Effect where you have to either send her or Caden to their death, I actually sent Caden, which I know you're going to think is like a travesty.
What? Seriously?
The reason being that I felt like Ashley was a stronger character. She was more determined and she had better potential to be a good leader. So even though she is bitchy, I decided to bring her along for the ride instead of Caden, who is definitely a nicer character, but is more of a, or at least from what I saw of him in the limited time, was kind of more of a pushover. So with that being said, I don't know that I'd go as far as leave them on Eden Prime. So maybe we should go middle ground here between the two of us, because you do not like her whatsoever, and I admire parts of her. So let's compromise here and say Purgatory. So right in the middle.
Purgatory?
Purgatory.
No, terrible.
Fine. Ship Specialist. That's as low as I'm going. Ship Specialist. Final answer.
Fine.
All right.
Fine.
And next up, we're probably going to be better aligned on this, is the lovely Edie.
I love her. She's fantastic.
Edie is really awesome. I love it when she tries
great.
to be funny.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic, and I love the if you encourage it and you go through her and Joker's dialogue options, getting them to develop the relationship and to follow it through, it's fantastic because they're so funny together.
Oh yeah,
Green
I did.
is great as the Joker, and I can't remember who does the voice acting for Edie, but they're
I can't
perfect.
remember either.
They're so perfect.
They made a pretty funny couple, and I totally encouraged it. I was like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, same here. I was like, nope, do it. Love them together. So I would put her either on My Suicide Mission, because I used her a lot actually as a tech specialist, or as N7. I would probably put her on My Suicide Mission instead, just because I tended to leave her on the ship because I had somebody else that I did as my tech specialist.
She was like a primary backup.
Yes, she was always primary backup, or I would use her as like a, if there was something specific to her quest line when it came around to it, I would swap out and use her instead.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree and go with On My Suicide Mission. I didn't have her with me all the time, but she definitely came out with me sometimes.
Yep.
All right, next up is my boy Garrus. All right, emphasis on my boy, because this was the character that I romanced. Now, granted, you cannot romance Garrus in the first game, which I was deeply disappointed with, because I knew that was the character I wanted to romance. So I actually had to romance Liara in game 1 and then break up with her in game 2 so that I could start romancing Garrus and then follow that through in game 3.
Garrus was awesome. He was such a badass. He was a great scout, great sniper, and I really enjoyed his story as well. I didn't actually use him a whole lot though, but then again, I was not, he was not my character's romantic interest.
Right.
So I think that's something we'd have to take into account on this, because basically, if you are following a romance option for any of the characters, be honest. Like we're going to have them in your party at all times.
Yes. Yep. Yeah,
So
you are, because you want to be able to build that bond as
exactly,
much as possible, have them interacting as much as possible. So
exactly.
yeah, if they're your romance, they're automatically going to be there
Yep.
like 24/7.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Also, last name was awesome. Garrus
mhm,
Vakarian. Like that was great. Great last
badass
name.
name. He was
He had
pretty
something. So
reliable with a gun.
he had overload, proximity mine, concussive shot, armor piercing ammo. Like all that stuff, very useful.
Hmm.
Overload, I used all the time.
Yeah.
Like I used overload all the time and got past enemy shields and everything. Armor piercing ammo also really good for the body armor enemies
Mhm.
and whatnot. Like pretty much in the game, it was either they have a shield or they have body armor or both.
Right.
And as long as you had party members that could do that reliably and quickly all the time, I thought it was great.
Right.
So yeah, I would say with overload and armor piercing, he'd probably be N7.
Haha. There you go, Garrus, where you belong. All right. Next up, we have Grunt,
Grunt is fantastic.
aka Rex's little brother. That's how I think of him. I know he's not technically, but
Yeah, no, he was fantastic. I love the Krogan. The Krogan were
yeah,
great.
the Krogan are a
Um,
very interesting race for sure.
super useful as tanks.
Oh yeah, very very
Obviously,
tanky.
like great for frontline combat. Yeah, like great for frontline combat. He was awesome. He had a really cool story as well, just because of he was basically
The
clone
lab
born.
baby.
So yeah, so he was trying to. His whole thing was trying to figure out who he was and what that meant to him, which I
Right.
thought that was really interesting. In the later games, I used him a lot because the Krogan are great tanks,
Yeah,
but I wouldn't necessarily consider him M7 material.
I wouldn't
Um,
either.
like I would put him on Suicide Mission just because the fortification was good and the incendiary ammo was great for getting rid of armor. However, aside from that, and aside from being able to absorb just a ton of damage, there really wasn't a whole lot going for him. I don't think.
I
Like he had a
might
great
say
story, but
yeah, he did. I might argue Purgatory then, right in the middle.
okay, yeah,
Is
I could
if
go
there's
along with
nothing
that.
that really sets him
Yeah,
deeply apart in terms of personality or skills.
yeah, I would still say Ashley should belong on Eden Prime.
Hey, we compromised on that, all right? All right, let's put a little grunt here on Purgatory.
Right.
Okay, and next we have Jack. Now, Jack was a really interesting character, very
Super
rough
cool.
around the edges, very badass. I
Yeah,
really liked Jack, even though I didn't take her
me
on
too.
all the missions with me. She could be quite powerful in combat, actually.
She could. Yep.
And she played a really important role in what I believe was the suicide mission.
Yes. Yep. Well, either it could have been any of the
I see.
biotics, like any of the biotic users. Like they could be the top tier biotic users. So like Caden, Jack, and
Oh yeah.
Samara. I think it was Samara and Liara. They could have done any of that. So it was
Yeah.
one of those three, I think. But
Gotcha.
I would
Still,
say,
it's got to be
yeah,
a
I
more powerful character to do it.
oh, absolutely. I would say probably, yeah, because of that, I would say Suicide Mission.
Yeah,
I was
I
thinking
would too.
Purgatory, but because useful in that, I would say Suicide Mission.
Yeah, I'd put her on suicide mission as well. She's not quite top line tier for me, but she's close to it.
Yeah.
She's definitely a strong character, one that I admire, but she can also be a pain in the ass. So,
Yes.
balances out. Next up, we have Jacob.
Cool dude. I liked him
Mhm.
a lot.
He's
Good
got a nice
story.
personality.
He like all around good guy kind of thing.
He's
But
almost
I
kind
just
of like Will in Baldur's Gate 3 in the sense that he's
yeah.
just like a good character, wants to make the right
Yeah.
choice, wants to stand up for people, wants to do the right thing. But that doesn't make him super interesting.
No.
He is a little blank slate-ish like that because it's like there's
Yes.
there's not a lot of gray in his character. And I feel like adding gray into a character is what makes them more appealing, what makes them more interesting, that they're not
Yeah.
just always on a straight path, that they deviate, that they make mistakes and they learn from those mistakes. And Jacob was mostly on a straight path. I can't say 100%, but he was very much straight and narrow in comparison
Yes.
with the other characters. So I'd probably throw him under probably like ship specialist or something because it's not like leave him
Yeah,
behind, but it's also
no.
like he's just not very appealing as
Yeah,
a
I would leave him
character.
on ship specialist.
Special ship specialist. Okay.
Yeah, because
Uh,
let's see, he had pull, barrier, lift grenade, incendiary ammo. I mean, again, pull useful,
mhm.
especially for like for battle tactics and for map control and everything. But and just general crowd control. Really, the only thing that I would use most often for him would be incendiary ammo or barrier, just to keep him alive because he was constantly going down. And so, yeah, I would just leave him as a ship specialist.
Okie dokie. And next we have James. So I'll
James.
admit, I don't know a ton about James because I didn't spend a whole lot of time with him. I wasn't bringing him on missions. Like what I do know of him, the interactions I did have with him, he just wasn't really setting himself apart for me in the
No.
game. So I was like, why would I bring you with me? I've got more interesting characters I could bring
Yeah.
along. So it's
Yeah.
not like a dislike of the character, but rather just a
Yeah.
disinterest.
Yeah, he didn't have anything that like set himself apart as far as I was concerned. He had Carnage, which basically just a bunch of damage from the shotgun, fortifications similar to Grunt, and then incendiary ammo. Again, really useful. They can spec it so that it applies it to the whole squad. All that stuff you can get from other characters.
Right.
Grunt had more HP than
Right.
he did, I think, at later levels, especially if you spec'd it towards HP. Like Grunt had way more HP towards the
Yeah.
end. So it was just like, yeah, cool dude. Very useful on his story missions whenever I took him along. But otherwise, it was just like, meh. So I would
Yeah.
say specialist as well.
Yeah, he just didn't stand out to me. He kind of felt like a staple character, like
Yes.
the brawny, thick-headed, badassy, stubborn, male character that you would see in a lot of like action films, essentially. Like there just wasn't anything really setting him apart from these staple characters that you often see. So I was just like, yeah, you're just kind of here. So I will agree to put him as ship specialist.
Mhm.
Next we have
Javik.
Javik. Thank you. Oh my God, I
Yep.
forgot again.
Oh,
So
good.
Javik is obviously a pretty interesting character because he's one of the Protheans, because of his background, because of who he is, and the fact that you actually get to have those flashback sequences where
Yep.
you get to learn about what happened to him and his
Yeah.
race. Like
Super.
that
Super.
gets you closer to the character, getting
Mhm.
to know him and what he's been through and why he is the way he is. In terms of his personality, I'd say that is a little on the bland side, but I kind of give him a pass for that because I think it is because of his race, his culture,
Mhm.
and what he's been through. I can't expect a Prothean to act the way that like Morden does, for example. Like they have
Yeah.
very different backgrounds and cultures.
Incredibly different. But he was
So
super useful.
I did take him out for a fair amount of missions once I actually
Yep.
got him, of course. I felt like he was useful in combat and that he did have
Very
an
much so.
interesting story and that he was important
Yep.
to the overall Mass Effect storyline. The
Yes.
whole thing. He's quite significant. More
Yep.
significant than most of the characters, actually.
Oh, yeah. And then
You could argue more
with
significant than Shepard.
almost, especially just because of the depth of the history that he gives, because he's a remnant from the past era,
Right.
like makes it gives you so much more insight and everything. Downside is I think he was DLC or a legendary edition. So you'd have to obviously
Yes.
pay a bonus for that, but
But with the Legendary
totally worth
Edition
it.
having coming out, you're not paying any extra for that anymore.
No,
You're just
no,
getting
not anymore.
you're getting all 3 games and then any DLC that used to
Yep.
exist. So that was a downside for the first time release.
Yeah.
It's no longer a downside now.
Yeah, because I got it for the first time release, so I just remember it being DLC, but so worth it. I remember getting it and was like, this could suck, but so worth it, so worth it.
Yeah.
And with his Dark Channel ability, super useful. And the other thing that was amazing for him was I think it was like the plasma rifle or something like that
Mm-hmm.
that you get for his character. Crazy powerful,
Yeah.
crazy powerful. It was awesome, and I think like once you get him, you can unlock it for the whole squad or something like that. So you don't necessarily have to use him anymore once
Right.
you get to that point. But oh my god, I remember going through a playthrough with him once I got him, and I was just like, "Holy crap! Hello, game changer!" Like
Right.
it was ridiculous. I didn't really bring him on a whole lot of things, but I was very happy with him whenever I did have to include him in my party. So I would say Purgatory, or yeah, I would say Purgatory.
I,
I wouldn't necessarily go with on Suicide Mission because I don't
I
think he had any extra.
I
Or do you
actually
disagree?
would. I would put him
You
on
would?
Suicide Mission. I
Okay.
think he's significant enough to the story that I
Okay.
would put him there, to be honest.
Sure.
So that'll be. We'll just put him one up. All right. Well, you're gonna have to speak to this next one, which is Caden, because I didn't get to know him that well because I left. I let him
You chose
die.
the wrong one. Failure. No.
I mean, he was a nice character. I know he was nice.
He was a good
He was a good one.
he was a good character. He was also kind of bland. It was the personality thing for me. Between him and Ashley, it was like I don't really care for either of these people. They're
Wow. Well, I'll just leave
they're
them both.
super. Yeah, if I could have, I would have. But they were kind of bland, just kind of vanilla characters
They
almost.
were
There
cookie
wasn't.
cutter,
They
right?
were very
They
cookie
just kind
cutter.
of fit into a character archetype
Yeah,
that exists in many pieces of media. There's the
yeah,
badass, determined, ambitious girl who's going to be a
yeah.
good leader, and then
Xenophobic.
the kind of well, that's the bad part. And then the kind of kind, gentle, well-meaning, sometimes goofy male
Yep.
that doesn't really do a lot of helpful things. I guess just kind of more moral support. Yeah, I'm gonna admit I kind of forgot about Ashley being xenophobic, and now I'm thinking maybe I should leave. Maybe I should put her on Eden Prime just for that.
I'm not gonna say anything.
Because I had forgotten about that part. Like, if you took that
So
out of
brutal.
if you took that out of her personality, the rest of it
Yeah.
would be good because
The- Yes.
she's a good leader and would
Yes.
be a good role model if it wasn't for the xenophobia. I'm sorry, Ashley. I forgot about that. You're going back to the time. I'm gonna let Misty win that one because that's a big enough mark to get you on the bottom of the list. Okay, sorry. Back
Right?
to Caden.
Because well, hang on. So
Oh, okay.
about that though. So I feel like both of them are combined, so I don't mind talking about both of them again. So because you have to choose which one you have to leave and which one you have to bring with you,
Yeah,
their stories are kind of tied together,
yeah,
and their characters are kind of tied together. They're both. She's straight soldier. She
yeah.
is very much like James Vega in that regard. So
Right.
she's alternative for James Vega. James Vega, super cool, much nicer guy, not xenophobic,
Yeah.
and you get him in Mass Effect 2, basically takes her place. So if you want another frontliner, you got James. And then with Caden, he's biotic. So he's
Mhm.
got extra abilities and whatnot that help him out. So I feel like that sets him apart from her.
But you
Just in
also
that regard.
have Liara in
You
the
also
first
have
game.
Liara. You do, and that's why. So it's just like, okay, you got Liara, you've got a ton of biotic choices, including Shepard themselves, if you want to go biotic build for that. So
Or you could go
there's a ton of
soldier build
biotic.
for Shepard though. So do you really
Exactly,
need Ashley or James or
exactly.
Jacob?
So it's it's hit or miss either way, but where Ashley was super xenophobic and just sorry, she was just a bitch, just downright, like
I'm not gonna
half the time.
deny that she was a bitch. I said I
Like
admired her for her leadership, her
yeah,
ambition, her determination. That's what I admire. I don't
yes,
admire her being
absolutely.
bitchy about it.
No, absolutely. Like she was a very strong character. She was very determined, and she got things done. I will give her that.
Yeah.
All props to her on those regards. But just because of her personality, otherwise, and I was just like, no, I'm gonna leave you, and I have no regrets about leaving her on Eden Prime. Like,
Right.
nope, totally fine. It doesn't matter to me. Whereas now, I think later on throughout their story, like if you chose to bring one or the other, obviously they do have character development even still. So you can
Yeah.
encourage her to grow and not to be xenophobic. I think. Again, I always left her on Eden Prime, so it's everything that I was just having to read from what I remember reading.
Ashley
So
doesn't even stay with you the whole time. I don't
no,
remember where
no,
it happens, but there's a split where she goes off
yes,
and she basically becomes her own military leader. I can't remember
and
which game that's in. It might be
I
the
can't
last
remember.
one.
Yeah, it's either the second or the third one. like
Yeah.
end of the second or the beginning of the third
So
one. I
does
can't quite
Caden stay
remember.
with you the whole time?
No.
Unlike, no, he does not. Okay.
No, not the whole time. It's this. He's very similar. He's parallel to Ashley in that regard. Like they stick
Okay.
with you for a while, and then they switch and
And go off and do their own thing.
join. Yeah, they basically stick with the alliance, and they do one thing or the other.
Okay.
I think Caden comes back at some point,
Well, you
but
do
either
meet up
way,
with Ashley again, but she's not like
yeah,
going to. If
no,
I'm
she never.
remembering correctly, you guys can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here. I
Yeah,
don't think she actually rejoins the group.
Caden was just a much nicer guy.
Yep, this is
Like
true.
he was much nicer. He had a dark troubled past just because he was experimented on. He was kind of like Elle from Stranger Things almost. Like he was experimented on.
Yeah,
It was at the
that's
start of
true.
not uprising, but it was the start of biotics becoming a thing with humans. So they were trying to understand it. So they gave them all weird implants or whatever to try and control their abilities, and so it all devolved from there. So he's got
Right.
an interesting backstory on some of that stuff, but because of that, he is a little troubled, and he has those issues every now and then. But even still, I found his story was very interesting as well. So I would say that he would be ship specialist, whereas she definitely be on Eden Prime. Like I don't,
So
I
Caden's
can't.
history is a little similar to Jack's then, because Jack was
Yeah,
also one of the ones that they experimented on.
yeah,
However, I mean, she was in prison versus
yeah.
I don't know what Caden
I
was in.
mean,
If he was in a school, if he was in a laboratory, if a
he was in a school, I thought,
so
or it
so
was like some
the way they were
facility.
being experimented on was probably a little different, but
Yeah.
okay.
Um, but he does actually, I would change it. So I would put him instead of ship specialist, I would put him in purgatory because I forgot. I'm looking up his abilities right now. So he has the Reeve ability, which is incredibly useful. It's basically like a health drain and give it to yourself. Super useful. He also has overload and
Mhm.
cryoblast. Like all of those things, incredibly useful. So I'd either put him in purgatory or on suicide mission, depending if you were romancing him. I would put him on suicide mission for sure. Or yeah, honestly, N7 suicide mission or purgatory. Either one.
Well,
Just because of
that's a wide range.
I know
I'm gonna
it's
put him on purgatory because I
okay.
didn't find his personality appealing enough to take him with me. So I'm
Yep.
gonna go middle of the road for him.
Sure.
But I see what you're saying about him being useful though. All right. And next we have Kasumi, which is another DLC only
Yep.
character. Or if legendary edition now, you're gonna get her automatically. Kasumi was an interesting character. She's not like super original, I guess, because
Yeah.
we've had a lot of those badass assassin characters in media.
Yes.
So it's not like she's, breaking the mold or anything, but she was
No.
an interesting character. She
She
did
was.
have her own personality. The missions that you do with her
They were
definitely,
fun.
change things up a bit, change the
Yep.
pace of the game.
They were fun. They
So
were good DLC missions and everything.
yeah. So I didn't bring her around with me a ton, but I did
No.
find her to be an interesting character.
Yep.
I
Plus
don't
she's got
remember what her abilities are.
yep, decoy, overload, tack cloak, and an armor piercing ammo. So overload
Okay.
and armor piercing ammo, super useful. And again, you can spec it so that the whole squad gets the effect of the ammo.
I guess she was good to bring around depending on how you wanted to fight your battles.
Correct.
If you wanted
Yeah.
a more sneaky approach, then you wanted her with you.
Yes. I would say purgatory for her, just because she didn't have anything to super set herself apart from everything, and she was interesting. She was a good character. I enjoyed having her in the squad when I did have to have her in the squad. But that was the whole point. It was I took her when I had to have her in the squad.
Hmm.
But I wasn't ever upset that I had to have her in the squad. It was just like,
Right.
oh,
It wasn't
okay,
like an
yep, I gotta bring her now.
inconvenience. It was like,
No.
oh, now I get to experience this part of the
Yep.
story. Yeah.
Plus, if you want, either tech or Venice Assassins, you've got like two other awesome options. You've got Thane and you've got Garrus.
Yeah, I'll agree to put her in purgatory. All right, next up we have Liara, and like I said, I
Oh,
had actually romanced
yeah.
her in the first game.
Me
And
too.
I felt a little bit bad breaking it off in the second game, but it's just I had already made my choice by the time
Yep.
I romanced Liara. I had already made my
Yep.
choice that I wanted it to be Garrus, that he was my main interest in the game. But Liara, I did find to be an interesting character, so that's why I chose her as like the first game romance. For me, she kind of stood apart from the rest. She was very soft-spoken, but still powerful. She was very thoughtful.
Yes,
Everything
she was.
that she said and did had a lot of thought behind it. And I know that her race is supposed to be, I guess a little more methodical, right? In
Hmm.
the way that they do things, in the way that they interact. But it always felt like she was almost pushing back a little bit against the confines of her race and her culture, and always wanting to push those boundaries a little bit and learn more. It
Yeah.
become more worldly, if you would. So I enjoyed my time with Liara. And even after we broke it off, I would often bring her with me or go
Hmm.
visit her and just
Yep.
talk to her
Yep.
because I enjoyed her company.
Oh yeah. I mean, after every single mission, after every single thing I did, I always made the rounds on the ship. Always, always, always. Because I was like, nope, I gotta make sure that everybody's loyal. I gotta make sure I follow all dialogue options. Like always did.
Yeah.
Went around to every single person on the ship that I can interact with. I mean, I romanced her for the first game and don't have any regrets about that. But then she broke my heart in the second one. So
Did
I was like,
she? I thought you
oh
broke it
yeah,
off.
she ended up I don't want to do too many spoilers, but she ended up going off to do something else because the second one starts like you die and
Yeah.
then she thinks you're dead, and then
Spoilers.
yeah, well, that's right at the beginning, you're going to find out one way or another, and
Right.
then you do see her again and you do have some options thereabouts, but by that time, like, I was already invested with another character, so it was just like, okay, nope. And then it was just like, oh, why did you do this? It's like, yeah, that happened. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, bye.
I guess that was kind of what happened. You have to basically tell her either you're with another character or
Yeah,
you restart things with her. Because if I remember
correct.
correctly, you have the option to
You
basically
do.
end things with the character
Yes.
you've started a relationship with
Yep.
and go back to her, or
Yep.
hey, I've moved on. And it is a little bit
Yeah.
sad to tell her that you've moved on.
Yes.
But I felt like she took it relatively well though.
She did. She
Um
did. And then the
and
other part of it,
that probably has to do with again her race and her culture.
probably, but the other part of it too, like, even if you do rekindle stuff with her later on down the line, I don't think she joins your party at that
Mm.
point. So you can rekindle things with her, but she's still being like, no, I gotta still do this stuff instead.
Well, she
Because
gets
originally
very
that was
wrapped up in her
DLC.
research.
Well, originally that was DLC for when you were able to do something, for when you were able to do stuff like that. Because there was part of her story or whatever that you didn't get until towards the very end, and it was just like,
Okay.
okay, well, I guess we're not going to do that right now. So at least that's how it happened in my game. Because that's where I chose to go do things because I was doing things in a certain order to try and make sure that everybody stayed alive. So
Right.
I was limited on my options for what I could do when. But so there is that. But she was still very useful. Her abilities were good. Warp, stasis, singularity. Singularity was really, really good because being able to just like lift everybody and draw them in,
Yeah.
super useful for crowd control. So I would either put her on suicide mission. Actually, yeah, I would put her on suicide
Suicide
mission
mission. Yeah, I would
because she
too.
was very useful.
Yeah. I definitely like her. I don't think she's like the tippity top, but she's definitely up there for me.
Yep.
And next we have another very unique character, Legion. So
Super
Legion,
cool.
who is technically part of the enemy, but
Yep. He was the Geth.
he ends up joining your side. Yeah, a little bit of an iRobot with him that he, breaks away from the masses and joins your side. Becomes part of a rebellion essentially. So obviously his like personality and stuff are going to be a little different because he is part of a race that is basically robots. Interesting story and interesting how he comes to be with you versus with, you know, his people, the
Yep.
Geth or Geth.
He-
Sorry. I said not Geth Yankee, Geth.
yeah. No.
Too much Baldur's Gate 3. I'm getting confused.
No, it's very useful. He was really cool. His story was cool. I love the whole AI self-awareness thing and the questioning things, and basically like their civil war that was happening between the guests. So fascinating. A very useful tech specialist, obviously. So I would say just other than that, kind of cookie cutter. But that's okay. He was still really useful. So I would say either on my suicide mission or purgatory. Just because I
Mhm.
didn't use him a whole lot, but when I did, he was always useful.
Yeah,
So
I didn't use him a whole lot either that I can recall, but he was useful, and I think what really made it for me is just he was so unique. Unique within the game space, not unique within the space of media, because
yeah,
obviously it's been done before, but unique within the game space. You weren't gonna find another character quite like him. So I would put him, I guess, under purgatory just because again, he's only unique within the game space, not within the media
yeah.
space.
Yep, I would put him in purgatory. Yeah, that makes sense because he was useful, and I never
Yeah.
disliked the fact that I had to use him for whatever. But
Yeah.
otherwise, that was about it.
Next we have oh my goodness, Miranda?
Miranda, I
Miranda,
think it was
yes.
Miranda.
Miranda.
Yep, Miranda Lawson.
Yeah, so
Um,
she definitely had a personality to her.
yep, she did. She did. Very strong, determined character. Really good at everything that she did.
Yeah.
Her abilities were warp, reave, overload, and incinerate. Super useful abilities, especially
Yeah.
that reave. Crazy useful. Her backstory was good. Basically used by the elusive man and everything, and protecting her sister and all
Yeah.
that stuff. I wouldn't necessarily put her on my suicide mission just because I had other characters that I always wanted to have with me. So I would just put her in purgatory.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you on that. I feel like she was kind of a better version of Ashley Williams because she was still a
Yeah.
strong, badass, determined, and ambitious girl, but she
Yes.
definitely had more empathy.
Yeah.
She had more emotion to her towards others, even if she didn't show it right away.
Once she opened
So,
up, she was good, but
yeah. Yeah,
yeah, I was.
she definitely wasn't always a good character, but that's what makes her more interesting. She was a great
Yeah.
character. It wasn't just on the straight and narrow. It was no,
Yes.
I've made some decisions in the dark. I've, made some bad choices. But not to say that there aren't reasons for them because her sister drove a lot of those decisions, but they weren't always the best decisions to be made. So yeah, I would put her under purgatory.
Yep.
Next up, we
Absolutely.
have Morden, who is a very interesting
Oh yeah.
character. I'd say
Love him.
he is one of the most unique characters that you
Yes.
come across in the entire series. I can't think of another character in the game that's quite like him, even within his own race. When you
Oh
meet
yeah.
other characters from his race, they're not quite like Morden. And of course, the best part is that little clip where he's talking about performing
Oh my god.
what is it
Yes.
called? Gilbert and Sullivan?
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert, which I know is a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
Gilbert and Sullivan. Oh,
Yeah.
it's so fantastic.
That was
Me being a
so
music major,
freaking
I was like,
funny.
that's awesome.
What's heartbreaking for me is that I lost Morden during the suicide mission. So he
Oh
was on the
no.
suicide mission and I lost him and I was
Oh
devastated. I was like,
no.
"Oh my god, no. Why?
That's
Why did I put you
terrible.
there?" Like
Oh
I didn't
no.
but me going into the game blind, I didn't realize like some of the stakes that were at play
Oh
there.
yeah. And that was awesome about this game too. Like
Well, yeah,
all the choices you made, they have
there
an
were
effect.
some
And if you don't
really
get,
big choices to
yeah,
be made. Yeah.
and if you don't have everybody's loyalty at the time you do the suicide mission, like that's it. Like you might not see them again. And
Yeah.
it's so good, but it just makes it like that much more heartbreaking too. But
Yeah. It
oh,
it
so
was
good.
very upsetting to me
Yeah.
that I lost
I
Morden
I
from
would put him as N7 just because his tech abilities were super awesome. His character was incredible, super useful all the way around. I would routinely swap out him and Garrus all the time.
yeah. No, I even though I didn't get to keep him around for the whole time, which was really disappointing, I would
Yep.
also put him on N7 because I totally would have kept him around if
Yep.
he had survived.
Yep.
So poor Morden, we barely knew you. Next up, we have Samara. Samara is a pretty interesting character.
Oh yeah.
is probably the most badass of all the female characters that you can
Yes,
recruit. She is a no nonsense woman, that's for sure. And
very much
just
so.
the way that she like handles her daughters is
Hmm.
just like, whoa, that's intense.
Ruthless. Yep.
But she's got this very strict definition
Yep.
of justice. And
Yep.
she doesn't really waver from it, even if there are emotions involved. Which, like, on the one hand, you can admire that she is basically the paladin in this story. Like that's
Hmm.
essentially what she is with
Oh yeah.
the Mass Effect sphere. Is she is a paladin. She does
Oh
not
yeah.
stray from her beliefs,
Nope.
but at the same time, you sometimes have to question her on like, hey, maybe this is too strict of a definition. Maybe you've gone too far. And I mean, eventually she gets to a place where she
She does.
starts to question herself, but it takes a
Yep.
long time. And
Yep.
there are
Lots of conversations.
definitely consequences to some of
Yep.
those actions for sure. You
That's
gotta
super
kind of
useful.
you gotta kind of admire her though. Admire
Oh,
her as a
absolutely.
character and admire her abilities.
Absolutely. And like her abilities, crazy awesome. I mean, she's got the Reeve ability, and if you unlock her loyalty or whatever, you can unlock it for the rest of the squad, and you yourself can have it. And I think that's like the only way that you as Shepard can have that ability. Crazy useful. Like if you're gonna get anybody's loyalty, get Samara's
Mm,
because so worth it. Because that health drain and gain back vitality for yourself was amazingly useful, and plus it went through barriers and stuff too. So I didn't really take her with me all the time, but I would definitely take her on the suicide mission one way or another just because
I
of her
took her
ability.
with me a fair amount of the time. Not all the time, not all the time for sure,
Yeah.
but she was a strong enough character
Yep.
that I definitely swapped her in sometimes if
Yep.
I felt like I needed
Oh yeah.
another badass character in there
Right.
to back me up essentially. So what do you
Sure.
think? Does that mean on suicide mission for her?
I would say suicide mission for her
Okay.
because like I would swap her in and out a lot depending on what was going on, but
Mm,
again, very useful otherwise. So
yeah.
she just wasn't one of the ones that I was always like, no, you're coming with me.
Right. Right, but she was there a lot of the time, yeah. And next up, we have Tally, and I know that you want her N7. I
I
already know that.
do.
Tally is your girl, just like Garrus was my
She
boy.
is. Yep. Yep. She is. She was so good. Her personality was great. Her abilities were great. She was a fantastic tech specialist. I would say that she would even be above Legion in that regard, just because of the specific abilities she had. She had sabotage, energy drain, and defense drone, combat drone. All of
Mhm,
those very, very useful. And with the other options for the suicide mission as well, she was one of the ones that you do something on the suicide mission. If you have her and you have her loyalty, they succeed.
gotcha.
So at the very least, she would definitely be on suicide mission.
So
Um,
I'm not actually gonna argue with you on this one on putting her on N7. Not only because, she's your girl, but also because, I did like her character. I
yeah,
thought that she had an interesting story. I thought that
yep,
her race and culture were interesting. She
hands
was an
down.
empathetic character, which
Hmm.
I felt like you didn't get a whole lot of them in this
Yeah,
story. Like, a lot of the
no, it's true.
characters were either too good or, like, too bitchy, and I felt
Yeah,
like Tally fell more in the middle of, like, "No, I'm not going to just go along with everything you say, but at the same time, I'm going to
yeah.
empathize with you, your goals with the other characters." So, obviously, she had her own complications with the most horrific immune
None.
system possible, basically non-existent.
They were
So
terrible,
so that
but
was, kind of an interesting backstory of how her race had to
yep,
adapt and live by,
yes,
making this machinery, these rebreathers, if you will,
pretty
so
much
that they can
like their
actually
suits.
exist in the world.
Yep,
And, obviously added a layer of complication if you were going to
yep,
romance her, how could you truly be with her intimately with those complications? And I know
yep.
that's something that they deal with in the game.
It
So
is, which was fascinating on how I loved all the science and everything they had. Like, this was
right,
one of the few games that I actually read the codex entries anytime I unlocked something, because
right.
it was fascinating the amount of thought and depth that they put into even just that stuff. Like it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I liked how when you were romancing an alien race, not just another human, like they actually
Mhm.
put thought into it to not just be like, yeah, it just happens, but like,
Yep.
no, we actually need to look into this to understand how we can do this safely so
Yep.
that you don't hurt me, I don't hurt you, that, this can be a successful, intimate endeavor.
Yeah,
Um,
successful pairing.
so it just made it a lot more interesting to go down the romance path with one of the alien races so that, there was like all this extra like story to it. It's not just, oh, hey, Kate, and I like you, you like me, let's
Yeah.
get it on. Um, but like you actually had to like wait it out and like do some research and let the other character come to you and say, okay, now I know how we can do this and we can do this safely.
Yep.
So it just added more interest to pursuing a romance option with someone other than one of the human characters.
Agreed.
Um, so I'm gonna put Tally in N7, which will make you very happy. Uh,
Huzzah!
and next up we have Thane. Thane is an
So
interesting
good.
character.
He is so good. He is such a badass assassin, and I really like how he's like an assassin monk almost, with
Hmm.
just his
Yeah.
mindset and everything, and such a tragic story. I can't remember what his abilities are off the top of my head. The depth of story for him and everything, and I think he's another one where if he's chosen for the suicide mission, you have his loyalty, like they survive for his team or something like that at one point. I would put him on Suicide Mission. Again, he was one of the characters that I swapped out a lot.
Yeah.
Because I was like, no, I want you in my party a lot of the time, but I would constantly like rotate some people out. So I would put him on Suicide Mission. But otherwise, he was so good. His
Yeah.
story alone is so interesting.
Yeah, he definitely was one of the ones that had a more interesting and tragic backstory, and
Very
it,
much
it
so.
definitely got you to empathize with his character. So I would put him on Suicide Mission as well. I
Yep.
think I might have actually lost him too, if I
Mm,
remember correctly, on the Suicide Mission. I think I might have
okay.
lost him, and that was also upsetting because I wanted
Yeah.
to get to know his character more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would put him on Suicide Mission. Next up,
Cool.
we have Rex, and
Oh,
let me
wait.
just
I
say,
gotta do this.
what?
Wait. Just
Okay.
wait. Shepard. Okay,
Okay.
now we can continue. Um,
Okay, there we go. So Rex is freaking awesome. Rex is just such a freaking tank. Like
yep,
it takes so much to
way
get
more
him
than fun.
down. Yeah, yeah, he is like the super tank. He is an absolute badass. He's got a temper on him, that's for sure.
Oh yeah,
But it makes him more interesting to interact with. The
really
fact that you
does.
have to like really try to keep him in line because he is like
Yep.
constantly pushing those boundaries. And I mean, not that he doesn't have a reason for it. I mean, the genophage, right? Like
Oh yeah.
his race is very troubled for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
like him and the others definitely have a reason to be angry all the time. Plus, some of it just works into like the biology of the race and how they survive. But
But he
yeah,
was
just
such a cool character
he
design and
he was a cool
backstory and
character
everything.
design. The whole race, the Krogan race, is a
Yep.
cool design. It was a cool idea. And the genophage gave you something to be empathetic about with
Yep.
those characters because even though they could be pains in the ass and really stubborn, the genophage almost gave them a bit of excuse the expression, but a bit of humanity to them,
Oh yeah.
that they had this epic struggle with
Yep.
their race, that they were basically on the brink of extinction at the hands of another alien race.
Hmm.
Uh, Mortar. um,
Yeah. Looking
but
at you, Morden.
the fact that you get to still work with him, even if you've got him and Morden on the same ship, that they're still going to
Hmm.
work together, and he may not be happy about it, but he comes to have this deep loyalty and respect for Commander Shepard. And I don't know what happens if you don't cure the genophage, because I did
Oh, I
decide to
did.
resolve that because
Yep.
I felt like that was the right thing to do
I did too.
for their race. And I know there were obviously the whole reason the genophage came about was the concerns about the race getting out of hand and their being prone to violence and aggression and everything. I decided to go with curing the genophage so that the race would not go extinct. And obviously that endears you to Rex because that's very important to him. I don't know what happens if you don't secure
I
it.
don't
If
either.
you end up losing him at that point, if he turns on you,
Yeah.
he definitely has the personality where I could see him turning on you if you don't go through with the cure.
Yep.
But
Or he
I
doesn't like
just
join your squad or something like that. I can't
maybe he
remember.
just leaves your squad or something. But I had Rex with me a lot. He
Yep.
was
Same.
almost always my tank.
Yep.
And I really just
Always.
liked his kind of brutish personality. He's basically the barbarian.
Oh yeah.
He's
Easily.
basically the barbarian in the group. He's just crazy. So I guess I just can't really say enough good things about Rex. He's N7 for me.
Oh, absolutely. Hands down.
Yeah. All right. And lastly, we have, I guess, another DLC character,
Yep.
Zaid.
Zaid.
Now I don't know a ton about Zaid just because I didn't bring him out with me a lot.
Yeah,
So
I didn't bring him out a lot.
he seemed to have an interesting personality from what I could tell. But in terms of like what he could offer the team, it didn't seem all that different from what the other characters could offer.
No.
Am I wrong in that? Did he have anything really unique?
Not really. He was a merc. He was a merc. He's kind of like a trade out for Garrus almost.
Okay.
He had Carno, Inferno Grenade, Concussive Shot, Disruptor Ammo. So he was a kind of a mix between, I would say, like Grunt and Garrus.
Okay.
So if you're trying to like fill like a niche role, I guess you could do something like that. But honestly, like he was good. He had an interesting backstory, like with the different merc squads and everything, going back and forth with stuff like that, and getting justice or getting revenge on people. But otherwise, again, really cookie cutter for something like that. Which is not to say that he wasn't interesting. It's just like it's a very stereotypical story. It's still really well done. Voice acting was great. Like
Yeah, he did have a really
I just
strong voice actor. I'll give him that.
he did. He was fantastic. But aside from abilities or whatever, like there wasn't much that made that character stand out. So while he was useful and while I would be fine with having him in the party, I would just say ship specialist.
Yeah, I
'Cause
think
he
I would
wasn't
too. It
he didn't overwhelm me with anything or
Right. He didn't like really stand out from the crowd that well, but he also
no.
like wasn't a character where it's like, oh, I want nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I don't
same. It
want you
was like
around. It's like, yo, you're fine to be here. I'm just probably
no.
not gonna take you out on missions that often. Like you stay with the
Yeah.
ship, you know?
Yeah. It's like, no, you stay here, you guard the ship. Like if
Yeah.
I take you out, run you around a bit, yeah, we'll be good.
Yeah. All right, so that was the final character on the squad mates list. So we've only got one left on Eden Prime. Sorry, Ashley.
Yep.
I turned on you.
Deserved.
I turned on you. It's the xenophobia, man. I can't really excuse that. So Ashley has to stay on Eden Prime while the rest of them at least go on the ship, if not on some
Yep.
missions here. Not too many made it onto the N7. We've only
Nope.
got 4 characters on the N7 there, so goes to show how picky we are, I guess. Let us know what you think in the comments, whether you agree, disagree, vehemently.
Yeah, we're probably gonna get some backlash on that.
Yeah, there's probably going to be some backlash on some
I
of
don't
these
care.
some of these choices, but that's okay. Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you like the video, hit subscribe. We're on our way to 500 subscribers. Appreciate the support. Thanks for watching.